It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Andrew said, when faced with an unexpected large expense, and he said it's probably like 75% of his emergency fund, do you recommend using the emergency fund, or should you sell assets in a taxable account? And then how would you suggest replenishing that according to the financial order of operations? So he's bopping along, and it sounds like he's mature in his financial order of operations. But he has this expense. And so I can either use my emergency fund or I can liquidate taxable assets. Well, I think before you answer that, you got to talk about what's the emergency fund there for? I think that's the first question that Andrew needs to answer before he can even step into this.
Well, we all know the emergency fund is for those big, unexpected, rainy day. That's why you want them to be 3 to 6 months. It's like if you have a job loss, a big medical thing that happens, that they are there for that. So the easy low-lying fruit is to go use the emergency fund for something like this. Now, look, this is the part, Bo, we were on a call the other day, and I thought this was the most genius answer. Somebody said, hey, how long does it take you to rebalance that? Like it takes 15 seconds and 15 years.
That's it.
Because, yes, you can do it very quickly, but you also had 15 years of experience that helped you navigate this. And I do think, look, I can give you the answer that I want you. This definitely sounds like an emergency reserve issue where you can go pull the money. But I will tell you, the financial planner in me goes, I want you to do that. But also, I think about, do we want to keep the emergency reserves, get them so lean that we get closer to 2 months when they should be at 3 to 6, definitely in that 3 to 6, when we have assets that don't have any appreciation that we could go sell or maybe harvest some losses and other things.
That's right.
That type of stuff immediately starts swimming in my head. And that's the thing. We can't give you that specific advice unless we actually could see your holdings. Right. And that's what the day job is as financial planners. But it is one of those things where you've got to take into account all your different pots of money. Know that the emergency reserves is the clear winner typically. Mm-hmm. But yes, I don't think it's crazy to think about, do we have some poor performing or some assets over here we have easy access to, so that way we don't diminish the protection that the emergency reserves, because ultimately you might be taking, if you take your emergency reserves, which is step 4 of the financial order of operations, where you diminish them down to, like you said, 75% takes them below the 3 to 6 months of protection, you probably are going to think about this in terms of, my next dollar probably is to build that back up. I got to get that protection covered. So that's why it does, from a financial planning perspective and our experience perspective, I'm thinking, is there ways, and maybe if I was in step 7, hyperaccumulation, I have some after-tax brokerage assets that have not performed well or even have some embedded losses. Maybe you can do a joint effort so that you don't diminish and deplete your emergency reserves to the point that you have to go back and do remedial actions later.
Yeah, I think you have to be so careful with your emergency fund, because it's exactly like what Brian said. It's there for these unknown, unexpected expenses. And the problem with unexpected expenses is we don't know when to expect them, right? And so you don't want to get so lean that all of a sudden, maybe if you lost your job or you had a medical bill or fill in the blank happened, you did not have those funds there to bridge the gap that they're there to bridge. What most often happens for our clients that we work with is when this type of event takes place, it's probably some marriage of both.
Yeah.
It's probably using some portion of the emergency fund to not get too lean, and then using some tax-efficient portion of the after-tax account. And then as you rebuild back, building up the emergency fund because it's earlier in the FU, and then rebuilding the after-tax. But again, your situation is unique. I would always just be very, very careful of getting that fund too low, because you say this all the time, Brian. Oftentimes when there are bad events or negative circumstances, they don't happen in isolation.
Yeah.
One thing will happen, and then another thing might fall, and then the third shoe might drop. You want to make sure your emergency fund is there to protect you against that second and third event that could take place.
Yeah. Unfortunately, volatility is an extrovert. Mm-hmm. He likes to have friends, so typically he's falling around with the housing market being beat up, jobs are down. So volatility, like I said, unfortunately, he's an extrovert. If he was an introvert, we'd be happy that things happen in isolation and he would just want to be alone. But, he's definitely trying to he's a partier.